welcome to DieCastRestos. My name is Jason and this is the 19D Lotus, in Lesney's Matchbox range from 1965, briefly converting to Superfast wheels in 1970 before being discontinued in 1971. It is a model based on the Lotus 25 Formula 1 racing car designed by the famed engineer Colin Chapman for the 1962 F1 season. It took the Drivers' Championship in 1963 and 1965 under Jim Clark, and the Constructors' Championship in both years as well. Now my model here is missing all 4 tyres, the driver, the steering wheel and all of the transfers, as well as much of the paint, so there will be plenty of work to do. I dismantled the model using the usual means. The car came with smaller front tyres than the chunkier rear set, and it came equipped with the number 3 decals and a yellow stripe down the middle. When it was altered to Superfast guise in 1970, the colour changed from racing green to a rich plum colour. It also had chunky Superfast wheels fitted instead of the yellow hubs and tyres. Later versions only had the number 3 labels attached to the top and not to the sides. So now I prepare the body for paint stripping using caustic soda and hot water. While I polish the strip model with a wire brush, I'll run through the history of the Lotus 25. The car was the first to use a monocoque chassis in Formula 1. That made the structure more rigid than the other cars of the period. It was half the weight of its predecessor, the 24, while 3 times stiffer. It was low and narrow, and that meant the driver was reclined a long way back in the cockpit. As such, it earned the nickname the bathtub. It was powered by a 1.5 litre V8 Coventry Climax engine. 7 Lotus 25s were built, with each known by their number R1 to R7. Jim Clark's teammate Trevor Taylor wrote off 3 of the vehicles, with 4 being written off in total between 1962 and 1966. The most successful of the cars was the one designated R4, which took Clark to all 7 of his championship wins in 1963. Clark had taken the car to its maiden victory at Spa-Francorchamps in 1962, with further wins that year at the British Grand Prix at Aintree and the US Grand Prix at Watkins Glen. Clark was in contention for the Drivers' Championship title following the win in New York State, but an engine failure while leading the final race of the season, the South African Grand Prix, handed the title to Graham Hill and BRM. After winning 7 of 10 championship races in 1963, Clark of course took the World Championship in the 25. The car was again used in 1964, taking 3 victories through Clark. This was despite its successor, the 33, being introduced midway through the season. The car was replaced by the 33 for 1965, but the 25 was raced by Clark in a single occasion at the 1965 French Grand Prix. He took the Lotus 25 to its final win, achieving a Grand Slam in the process, pole position, leading every lap, and setting the fastest lap time. This is Tamiya TS9 British Green. It's quite dark and perhaps darker than I had anticipated, but I will wait and see how it dries. Now I'll give that metal base a polish. So with that final victory for the 25 at Clermont-Ferrand, it etched its way into the history books as earning a Constructors' Championship title, despite the 33 earning Clark 5 victories that season. Now my history lesson on the Lotus 25 has been very Jim Clark centric, but the fact of the matter is that he is the only man to drive the car to victory. Colin Chapman had customer cars for his Lotus 24, but specified for the 1962 and 1963 seasons that Team Lotus would have exclusive use of the 25. As such, only 4 drivers took to the wheel of the 25 competitively across those first 2 years. That was apart from Jack Brabham, who in the first race of the 1963 season took the wheel of Team Lotus's spare 25 after his own customer 24 had suffered engine failure. Reg Parnell Racing were customers of the 25 for 1964, 1965 and again in 1967, earning points in 64 and 65, but achieved no podiums. It was raced competitively for the final time in the 1967 Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort. The car being driven was the successful R4 chassis, as driven by Clark in 1963. This time it was driven by British driver Chris Irwin, who took it to a 7th place finish for Reg Parnell Racing. He was 2 laps down on the race winner, you guessed it, Jim Clark, in his Lotus 49 in its debut race. So you've seen me struggling with the water slide for the front for a while, but eventually it sits where it's supposed to. I'm very careful to gently squeeze out all of that excess water, letting it dry before applying some setting solution. So here are all the component parts, including the reproduction driver and steering wheel, and the replacement tyres that have been fitted. It's quite an awkward process to fit the exhausts through the rear opening, and I'm very conscious about scratching the paint. So I'll speed up my slow progress until it is at a point where it gently lowers into position. The base can then clip over the tiny little rivet post at the front, and my flathead 2mm screw will keep it all held in place. So let's remind ourselves where this restoration began. I had this patchy, driverless Lotus 25 replica, missing its tyres, decals and the majority of its paint. It was ripe for a restoration and a good old storytelling for good measure. At the time of his death in 1968, Jim Clark had more race wins than any other driver. That number? 25. So here's what my Lotus 25 looks like once complete. I think the shade of the paint really suits. In my opinion, the green on the original may have been just a bit too bright, but it depends what sort of light you're looking at the real thing in. I've added replacement wheels from a donor model, with reproduction decals and nicely polished metalwork adding an extra dimension to this piece. The reproduction driver is low slung just like a real life racer would be, and if I were to do a custom model, I'd have painted him up as well. I've immensely enjoyed this restoration, and I love the background stories to cars like these when they are so fascinating. It will push me to prioritise finishing my 52B BRM sister car, I suppose, that's been in the pipeline for ages. Anyway, that's all from me for today. If you've liked the video, please comment, share, subscribe and hit that like button. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again for the next one. Bye for now.